Hello, everybody. Welcome to the program. My name is Dan Tandas. I'm the Director of Research, Policy and Advocacy at the Tanzania Bankers Association. Tanzania Bankers Association is an advocacy body for the banking sector, where we advocate for the business interests of the banks that are operating in Tanzania. And today on this program, we have Mr. Sanjay Rughani, who is the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Tanzania. He is the Vice Chairman of Tanzania Bankers Association, and he's also the chairperson of the CEO Roundtable. Our main topic today, we'll be talking about sustainable development and all matters related to sustainability. Welcome to the program, Mr. Sanjay Rughani.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a pleasure to see you once again.
Yes.
I really enjoy all the interactions we've been having.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the program. Today, we'll be talking about sustainable development, more especially sustainable financing. You're very welcome to the program.
Thank you. Dan, it's an absolute pleasure to be meeting you and talking about sustainability. You know how important it is to me as a person, but it's very important for Tanzania and the world at large.
Thank you very much. Now, to start it off, sustainable development is now a very important, as it has always been. And Tanzania has committed itself to implementing sustainability, or rather sustainable development, through the SDGs. What is your take or views on the implementation of SDGs or the achievement of SDGs in Tanzania?
I think a few things. First of all, it's good that the country has been pretty bold in its commitments to sustainable development goals. We do need to recognize that we have less than 8 years now, because by 2030 we have to achieve our sustainable development goal commitments. If I look at the 5-year development plan, 2021-22 to 25-26, clearly the government has well articulated its commitment and its plans. If you look at the Tanzania Vision 2025 report again, we've been very bold about, making sure that we implement our sustainable development goals. From all the reports we have seen, also it's been encouraging that we have seen progress. So whether it is around inequalities, gender issues, much more during the 6th phase government, of course, we become bolder. Issues of health, wellness have taken action. If you look at education, we've made progress. On the aspect of water and sanitation, we've seen progress. Also in the area of work, and good development, we've seen progress. As Tanzania, we've also seen progress in good alliances, which is part of Pillar 17 and partnerships. But it's still wanting. We have 8 years and we have huge commitments. The pace at which we are operating, if we just continue with the same pace, clearly will be challenged in achieving the sustainable development goals that we have committed. This is also at the backdrop that globally, financing or capital is more and more challenged, with the volatility, whether it is because of the pandemic, now because of the war, and also that we have more emerging commitments, energy commitments, food security commitments that can take precedent over some of the sustainable development goal commitments. So my recommendation is to first integrate the national framework whereby every Tanzanian is aware of the commitments, and we get to a position where every Tanzanian is also contributing to the commitments. I think there is broad understanding, government is doing its bit, private sector is playing its role, but it is, with the time that is left, we've got to turbocharge our ambitions, and that can only happen where every Tanzanian is aware of what are the commitments and also plays a role towards achieving them. Everybody has something to contribute, is what I would say. So good progress, a lot to be done.
Thank you very much. When you were speaking, I got a feeling that sustainability really has to be, it's multi-sectoral, and it touches quite a lot of issues. Talking about education, poverty education, health issues, jobs, which brings in the question of eradicating unemployment or reducing unemployment. What is the rationale of partnerships? Many stakeholders coming together to just work on this issue. The rationale of partnership on sustainability.
When you talk about partnerships, there are 3 key players. into the equation. One is the public sector, which is the government. The second one is the private sector, which includes Bankers Association, of course, and its members, but the overall business people, everybody who is in the private sector. And the third is really the development partners. When it comes to sustainability and achieving sustainable development goals, these three players need to integrate and create a much more bigger win-win equation, whereby, we all are focused towards a national action plan. We all are, like we say, we are tied from the hip and making sure we progress in the same direction. Partnerships also means that we're bringing in many more solutions. If you look at the world now, a lot of countries are really using the fourth industrial revolution to make sure that we fast track our ambitions to achieving the sustainable development goals. It also means that you integrate your national technology plans or digital plans, also demand much more faster private sector integration by for a private sector investing more in technology, and development partners also supporting that whole initiative really. So that's what partnerships means. It means working together. But let's not forget, partnership also means bringing every national citizen, every Tanzanian to play a role, and that is really bigger partnership.
We are talking about sustainable financing, which is closer to us as the stakeholders in the banking sector. What is it really? What does it mean, and what is it all about, sustainable finance?
There are many discussions and many definitions of sustainable financing. It is also about, from what angle do you view sustainable financing? I think for Tanzania, we need to look at two critical aspects. So if you look at the national aspect, sustainable financing means investing or promoting investment in two areas. One is towards our commitments of sustainable development goals, and secondly, investing or committing towards the whole area of Paris Agreement that we have signed, which is climate. So when you achieve your sustainable development goals and when you achieve your Paris Agreement commitments, it is really where finance should be flowing. And in that way, where nobody in the nation is left behind, which means everybody prospers and everybody feels an impact. But when it comes to the banking sector, as we have debated in the past, for us it is really about looking at the national priorities, and for us it's about maintaining and enhancing commitment to long-term impact, being a force for good. As a force for good, we look at three key constituents for us. One is clearly the firms, the corporates, the organizations that we bank. The second one is clients, every client, every individual, every national. And the third for us is society. When the banking sector looks at sustainable financing, it's really about looking at the impact on these three constituents, but really it's also looking at the three dimensions of economic, social, and environmental impact. So that's really how we define sustainable financing.
From this discussion, we just understand and we've just observed that sustainable financing is critical if we are to achieve sustainable development. What role that can be played by the private sector, and in this case, what role can be played by TBA to support the agenda, the sustainable development agenda?
So that's a very good question, Dan, because you've talked about the role of the Bankers Association or banking sector. In that sense is the whole financial services industry, and also the role of the private sector. So as I said, sustainable financing, as I was defining it for the Bankers Association, there are four key aspects to it. From a Bankers Association perspective, we have already debated this at length, and you are aware that in 2019, towards the end of the year, we also created a sustainable finance framework, which is still moving into different dimensions. I know we've also already spoken to the central bank, and it's currently in the review. The Bankers Association is also currently undergoing a new strategy review, and I know sustainability and sustainable finance will become a key part of it. But it's really looking at 4 key aspects. The first one from my perspective is, and this is what was debated, is really about looking at the whole area of risk management. So from a banking perspective, we are known to be looking at credit risk, liquidity risk, capital risk, operational risk. But now it is really looking at environmental risk and social risk, which is part of the whole sustainability agenda. Secondly, so that's the risk aspect. Secondly, it's about our personal commitment as organizations, as banks. And that means we all need to have a strategy. One, to make sure that we are making bigger impact on sustainability by the practices that we have, by the strategy that we have, by the different propositions that we bank, really, because it's really about walking the talk. And that means we are also publishing reports that indicate the progress we are making. The third role is, for the Bankers Association is really this whole area, when you talk about sustainability, is really about being more inclusive. And as a Bankers Association, we've worked very closely with the central bank to become more inclusive. Having said that, in Tanzania, we all know that 60 out of every 100 shilling is still not in the banking sector. So there is a big room for us to continue to become more innovative and more inclusive. That means we also need to demand for stronger policy reforms, which enable Tanzanians to become more bankable or to use more banking facilities. We've made so much progress now. If you look at the whole concept of agency banking, I wouldn't be surprised that we've probably got 30, 40, 50,000 agencies now, which means that within every 2 to 3 or 5 kilometer radius across the nation, there is an agency. So I guess the population of Tanzania needs to, in this case adult population that is bankable, needs to utilize the capabilities of banking sector. So innovation and inclusivity needs to continue. And the last role for the Bankers Association really is about getting all the policy owners together on one table and drive more collaborative policy reforms. Committing to sustainability requires a lot of capital. So you need to come up with tax incentive, you need to come up with priority sectors that are necessary, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's energy, whether it is mining. So you need to be more clear about the agenda in perspective. So it's not that work has not happened. There is good work that has happened, but we've got to really get more alignment in this. You also asked what's the role of the corporates, and as the chairman of CEO Roundtable, we have debated this extensively. We've spoken a lot about climate, and we've also spoken about sustainability. So the role of corporates is very simple. Number one is we all need to have a bolder strategy and commitment to sustainability, which means long-term value creation for the society, in essence. We all need to have a purpose-led strategy, which looks at people, planet, and prosperity of the nation, which means real economic growth. We need to report. There is a need for us to embrace more the integrated reporting, integrated thinking, or sustainable reporting, which is critical. Our ambitions to net zero, which is climate, the world has committed that we need to make sure that we are, within a parameter and also, making sure that we eliminate our emissions by 2050. Eliminating means what? You currently reduce, you eliminate, or you offset. All those things are very critical. And as corporates, every company needs to have a plan towards a net zero agenda by 2050. And Tanzania has committed to the Paris agenda, which means that this is a necessary dimension we need to take. And then fourth is really about embracing more ethical business practices and good governance standards. Sustainability without good transparency, good governance, ethical practices is just not going to happen. So there are all those roles that need to be played. I think between the Bankers Association and the corporate, there's also need to look at new financing models and new financing options and work with the government also. There's the whole area of what trade-offs do we make and what options do we use. So there's a lot of financing available, if you want, around green financing globally. So it's really coming up with those products and frameworks so that we can optimize impact.
Thank you. I also want to ask you, your views about the fact that as a country we have got huge plans and we have introduced the third development plan, plus many other plans that we have. How is sustainability, sustainable financing featuring in? How is it going to feature in?
So I think Tanzania has continued to be bold around maintaining good peace, which is part of the 5-year development plan or the third 5-year development plan. So that means that there is commitment to embracing society, with good impact. But where we see the biggest impact is, the government is very committed to these significant infrastructure projects, which really help to fast track our sustainability ambitions. So whether it is energy, whether it is ports, whether it is roads, we've talked about the standard gauge railway, so it's the railway. So even though the world is volatile and we have short-term challenges driven by the pandemic, short-term challenges driven by the current war, what is very useful to note is that as a nation we continue to be committed to solving instant issues, but also committing to our long-term ambitions, which are around sustainability. And you will see that, as a nation, even in the toughest times, we've continued to maintain good growth. We've seen a growth of about 4.5%. I believe this year will be a shy of 5% or just around there. But as we are committing and investing in the long-term projects, Tanzania is going to continue to bounce back and, very quickly get to 6, 6.5, and up to maybe 7% growth rates. And that is very well articulated in the 5-year development plan, and we can see progress. However, to achieve sustainable development goals, there is a lot much more that needs to be done.
Yeah, I would like to take you back to the issues that you spoke about, the role that can be played by the private sector. I know there were draft sustainable finance principles that were developed by CEO Roundtable, that you were the chair, and TBA, that you are the vice chairperson. What do you think those principles can add value? I mean, what value are they going to add to the whole question of sustainable financing and its implementation here in our market?
So, Dan, you know that the principles were driven looking at the global principles, and they were very linked to our governance models. How do we do business more ethically? How do we become more responsible? How do we add purpose to the equation of real business? How do we look at long-term impact to society in everything that we do? But it was also very linked to the sustainable development goals, which means we look at areas of hunger, poverty, inequality, water, sanitation, health, partnerships, alliances, etc., etc. So it looked at a very broad framework, but came up with 4 or 5 key principles, which could have bigger impact to society and to the nation. Your question is, how will it drive bigger value? So I think number one is we've got to demand that that sustainable finance principle gets adopted. It becomes a national framework. After it is adopted, the key action that we need to take is that we need to get into capacity building. Capacity building means we understand, we adopt, we practice, and make sure that the sustainable finance principles become part of our DNA, business DNA, which is very important. The third thing to do is to really adopt reporting principles, because what doesn't get reported cannot be seen, and here we need to really be able to demonstrate impact on the society, which is critical. The sustainable finance principles also elevate our ambitions to continue to be more innovative, optimize on the 4th industrial revolution, because they are key drivers to achieving our goals, sustainable development finance, sustainable development goals. So I think that it is all that can be achieved through implementation of the sustainable development principles that we have come up with. They are in draft form at the moment, clearly, like you articulated, but we need to be much more forceful to adopt them, and that's the only way we can become a bigger force for good.
Thank you very much. Now let's talk about the role that Standard Chartered has played. You have been in operations here in Tanzania as a bank for a very long time, and you have done quite a lot of initiatives around
That's true.
sustainability. What is the role that you have played and you continue playing towards ensuring that we have a sustainable economy, sustainable world?
So Standard Chartered is uniquely bold that we want to be the world's best sustainable and responsible bank. If you see the role we play in Tanzania, besides providing products and solutions that really drive sustainability, there are multiple things we do. Number one, Dan, as you said that I play a role in different forums. I think the capability that Standard Chartered brings through the global network that we have allows us to play a much bigger role in the society, in the community, and in the nation. So we are not just bankers, but we are involved in promoting good business and good practices in the nation through the different roles that I play. It's not only me, a lot of my team members are involved in different associations and different forums. So that is one. Two is through our product capabilities. Clearly we've been supporting, the national priorities and priorities of our clients, which are very linked to sustainability. ESG is very core and part of our framework, and all decisions that we make are looked at from that lens. Particularly if you look at Tanzania, one thing that we are very recognized for recently is, that we have supported the nation on the standard gauge railway transaction, whereby we raised financing worth $1.6 billion to support the government's ambitions. We have also further, if you saw the news last week, further committed to supporting the government in enhancing our support on financing of the standard gauge railway. I know we are soon, concluding on the dimensions of Lot 3, Lot 4, Lot 5. So I think we're making a bolder commitment. We are also in discussions, with the government to look at areas of road, port, airport. All these are infrastructure projects that have long-term impacts to the society, so hence they are very sustainable. What we are also doing with our clients, and this is very important, not only in Tanzania but globally, is elevating and influencing their ambitions on climate agenda. This is very critical and core to not only Tanzania but the world. We've got to make sure that we manage our carbon emissions well. So in the areas or in the organizations that are the highest carbon emitting organizations, we are having more deliberate conversations with the management of those, because we bank them, and we are being more constructive in ensuring that we are very clear about the strategic, their strategies to achieve climate zero, their strategies to achieve sustainability. And we as a bank are not only, we are providing them with transition finance. Globally we have committed to $300 billion of financing towards just the climate transition, which means we work with our corporates, we look at their commitments, we incentivize them by giving them better financing products at better pricing, so that they can fast track their ambitions, which means, investing in reducing carbon emissions, investing in good practices. So that's what we are doing. Besides all this, I think we are also becoming bolder by working with our clients, but also analyzing, the nation and coming up with a lot of research and information, which will help, not only the bank, but also the nation to, embrace good practices, really. And we'll continue to be in the forefront of this. So our role is going to be, thought leadership. Our role is going to be providing the right innovative solutions, but our bigger role is going to be also influencing, so that we get to the net zero ambitions, but more importantly to the sustainability ambitions.
We see that Tanzania has got very ambitious plans when it comes to socio-economic development, but more particularly economic growth. But this requires adequate and sustainable financial resources. What do you think needs to be done, and what's the outlook?
So I think, Dan, clearly, one is good to have good ambitions, and a lot of our investment that we are looking at is in infrastructure, which will drive more sustainability. But we do need to realize that globally, and if you just look at Africa, to drive sustainability and achieve sustainable development goals, the demand of financing is close to $500 billion every year. And you know that with what the world is facing today, the pandemic and also currently the war, resources can become constrained. However, what is also important is the lack of resources or the availability resources also depends on putting in certain frameworks, which are very important. So if we create the right frameworks that, a lot of our investment can directly be attributed to sustainability, which means impacting the last mile, by creating the right national policy frameworks, which is what are national policy frameworks? So number one is we've got to be very transparent as a nation. We've got to have good governance, number two. Number three, we've got to have sustainability of policy. Investors put in money where there is sustainability of policy. Number four is through our budgets, national budgets, we've got to be very clear about what are sustainable projects or sustainable initiatives and what are other initiatives. Where there are sustainable initiatives, you've got to be very clear about, so what's the impact that is going to be made. Then it is really about, using the right, as we call aggregators, working with the financial services industry, banks. When you have a desired ambition towards sustainable, financing requirements, you've got to work with the banks. There are multiple ways in which we can help raise financing. As long as we understand the national ambitions more clearly, you could look at multilateral financing, DFI financing. You could look at working with different sovereigns, as we've already been doing. But I think we should also look at, promoting more private sector financing, because then they are related more to the, private sector ambitions. There is also an area where you can do, innovation financing. Green financing is becoming much more bigger. So sustainable financing demands will continue to grow across the world and across Africa. And our ambitions, as you say, are very significant. So it's really about creating the right national framework. Like I said, there should be even good judiciary framework. There should be accelerated execution of our projects, so that the stakeholders that finance, get to see quick value. So it's promoting good governance and frameworks, and also understanding the different types of financing options and optimizing on both.
Thank you very much. It has been great to have you on the program. I look forward to have you in the next programs.
Thank you very much, Dan. And it's a pleasure to be talking to you also.